Hi everyone, and welcome back to season 3 of Commerce Meets Law, a podcast we talk about various commercial topics and how they interact with the legal profession. This season is all about people who have broken barriers and stereotypes, who've not just stepped outside the box, but shown that these boxes simply do not exist. This week, I am super excited to share my conversation with Rob Green, founder and CEO of the GRM Group, a multi-award-winning legal executive search, career coaching, and strategic management consultancy with a long history across developing and frontier markets. In this episode, we firstly discuss how and why Rob decided to enter the world of legal recruitment and why he's been in this industry for the last 20 years. How his desire for improving people's careers has taken him from Asia to Africa and beyond and resulted in the GRM Group being a global success. Why Rob decided to set up the GRM Group in South Africa 8 years ago, and his thoughts on international law firms such as Allen & Overy and Hogan Lovells deciding to close offices in this region over the last few weeks. And finally, his future plans for the GRM Group within the African market and the legal space in general, which are incredibly exciting. Throughout this conversation, Rob's passion for transforming the world of legal recruitment and the profession as a whole really shone through. And I truly felt so grateful to have had the opportunity to speak to him and bring the conversation to our amazing Commerce Meets Law community. I thoroughly hope you enjoyed this conversation. Please don't forget to check out Rob's Linktree so you can connect with him and continue to learn from all of his invaluable content on YouTube and on Spotify and on the Substack as well. Just a kind request before we get into the conversation. I'd really appreciate if you could give the podcast a follow and a rating on Spotify. The higher the better, but I leave the rating up to you as it really helps Commerce Meets Law reach more listeners. Without further ado, I really hope you enjoyed this episode once again, and I'll see you right at the end. Hi Rob, and welcome to Commerce Meets Law. Really excited to speak to you today and to get into all things legal careers and the GRM Group. So before we get started, we have an icebreaker on the podcast, and the question is, in your opinion, what is your superpower?
Well, thank you firstly, Shaya, for inviting me to be on. Absolutely delighted, and it's been a pleasure so far. And that is, I mean, I'm sure I'm not the only person who said this, but that is a really difficult question. And I did actually, I was at home about 3 hours ago, and I was with my wife, and I said, you know, the first question is likely to be, what is my superpower? What do you think it is? And she obviously just looked, smiled, because I don't think it's necessarily the question that I should answer myself. It feels a little bit, I don't. Probably feels a little bit egotistical, but I did speak to my wife, who's known me for 20 years and has been around the world with me, and she was very kind and she said a few things. But if I had to pick one out of all of it, she seemed to lean on, and I would probably agree with her, would be my humility, my ability to continue to learn, my ability, and obviously this, you know, if it's a spider diagram and you take humility at the center of it, and the ability to be humble, and the ability to be wrong, and the ability to pick yourself up when things go badly and not blame the world, just go, right, we've got to learn. I think that's probably my superpower. And it's allowed me to obviously move out of the UK to the Caribbean, to the Americas, to Asia for a very long time, now onto the African continent for the last 8 years, and actually, you know, come across as I am, which is, you know, I hope, a decent guy, and have humility in person, learning about different cultures, ingraining yourself in a different way of life, and also in business as well. Is that you know, you have to have, especially attached to the legal market, you have to be humble and have to have humility, because they're not always going to be right.
That's super interesting. That's actually quite a one that we haven't had yet. So it's definitely a new one to add to the list. And talking a little bit about sort of the journey that you have been on across the world, I kind of want to take a couple of steps back. So starting with, you know, growing up in the UK, can you tell us a little bit about what your sort of interests and passions were growing up, and whether that passion for sort of learning was always there in you?
Yeah. So I grew up in a place called Tolworth, which is a tiny little town just next to Kingston in Surrey, or South London, as some will call it, but it's really Surrey, North Surrey. Tolworth, if anybody's listening that knows it, it's got a roundabout and an office block called Tolworth Tower, and that is about it. Small town, um, you know, just only child, so just me and my mum and dad. My dad worked really, really hard. He was a postie, so he used to push the bike around, rain, shine, and snow, everything. One working parent, very, very working class, very comfortable, but very working class background. And the thing that really sort of shaped my interests and passions growing up there, the one thing that, I mean, obviously you know this, and some of your listeners will know this, is that it's not really until you get older that you start to look back and start realizing, oh, that's the way I was when I was a kid, and that stays with you. And one of the things that was absolutely key to me, and has always been, is a sense of adventure. I didn't know when I was a kid that I wanted to see the world, but I just knew I wanted to. There was more than where I was at. And I'm sure. I mean, again, I don't know where you grew up, and I don't know, your listeners, but those who've got a sense of adventure will know what I mean. You just, when you're at 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, you're just something in you that's just like, I'm not where I'm supposed to be. There's more to life than Tolworth High Street. And that is something that I've that has really stuck with me as a real passion. And obviously, as a young lad, I was, it was all about sport. It was all about football and swimming. I swam for Surrey. I played tennis for Kingston, and I was playing football all the time. I mean, I was swimming training, as anybody out there knows, minimum 5 times a week, a lot of times 7 times a week. It seems a while away now, but sport, and just pushing hard, always pushing, all of these things that sort of, you realize that they just become ingrained in you. It's like this never give up, always pushing, always training, and really realizing that there is, what it sounds so cheesy to say, but that life really is there for the taking. So my passions really were, activity and sport, and adventure, which is weird because I probably had like one foreign holiday when I was a kid. It wasn't like I'd been around the world. It wasn't like I had rich parents who took us around the world. We literally just had one holiday to Mallorca. But it was more of an adventure of there's more to come, and that really shaped me as I then moved around the country and then around the world.
That's super interesting. And I think I've grown up, I was born in India and I grew up quite a lot around Asia before moving to the UK. And so I think that maybe, although I didn't choose it at the time, my parents sort of made that decision. I think that living in different places and exploring the world does really shape you as a person. I can absolutely, I think, attest to that. And I think it really brings that sense of, it brings out so many qualities in you that you may not have realized. And so I think that part of it is so, so interesting.
Now I'm based in South Africa, and I have been here for a number of years now, and I think obviously this is a country, as I'm sure former guests yours have attested to, and and is well known, has had a, shall we say, troubled past. And one of the things that I've been asked a lot about with my teammates, who are from all different backgrounds, of all different ages. I'm 48 and from the UK, and I think the youngest person in the office is 24 from the Eastern Cape in South Africa. We couldn't have had a more different background. And we're always talking about differences in cultures and differences in approach. And one of the things that I got asked the other day, and you will be able to attest to this as someone who's traveled the world and lived in different places, is that one of my colleagues asked me, what do you think has all of those travels and living in different cultures given you? And I said, it's really simple. It's an understanding that actually we're all very similar. We're all very, very similar. We want a healthy life. We want to eat good food. We want our kids to be healthy and safe. We want, without getting too political, we want to stop all wars. We want to get on with life. We want to have good careers. We want largely we want the same things, regardless of what we look like and regardless of what our backgrounds are. And that is something that I'm so pleased that I took the leap to learn, as it were.
Definitely, and I think just on that point, I think you're so right that I I think the more you realize that the world is so different and yet so similar all at the same time, and I think that is a fascinating paradox for sure. And the more people you meet from across the world, the more you realize that. I think bringing that back to, I guess, careers and talking about law, as someone who likes adventure, why did you choose this sort of the legal profession in particular in order to pursue that passion? Where did that interest in law sort of first come from?
Yeah, I'm going to be really honest with you, as I always am, honest to a fault, and you can blame my mother for that. The so I My mum and dad were very they would never force me to do anything. It's a brilliant parenting technique that I've taken on with my kids, which is, well, very brilliant in my eyes. I was always asked my opinion. Do you want to do this? Do you want to do this? You know, whether it's sports or extracurricular activities or going to a different school or whatever it might be. And then when it came to studying, the only time I can remember my mum saying, "You really should go to university," and I think she might have even said it once. So
Yeah.
largely because I was the first person in my whole family to go to university, and I mean extended family as well, cousins as well. Subsequently, other cousins have gone, thankfully. But I didn't really have you know, anyone to follow. Like you mentioned
Yeah.
earlier, that you didn't have a family weren't in law necessarily or studying law. So I just wanted to go with. I wanted to study something that was that I was quite interested in, and I remember doing
Mm.
at college. I was doing. There was two things. There's two lessons actually that I remember. One was a business and finance course that I thought sparked an interest in economics and how the world works economically. And
Mm.
then one was marketing ethics. And I just remember we learned about whether it was ethical for supermarkets to place certain goods in certain eye lines because that sells better. And, that whole
Mm.
beginning part of the way, they would have things at the front of the store and things like that. And I just remember thinking, that's really interesting for me. So I studied marketing, and I really enjoyed it. And actually, I use marketing to this day, with our
Yeah.
podcast and with our campaigns throughout social media. And I find it fascinating, that world. So that's what kind of drove me to university and to study marketing. And then when I came out of university, my first job was with a listed company. And as per usual, you get a job and you're really only in it for 16 months or so. Let's be honest. You only need to look at people's LinkedIn profiles. Their first job out of university, they typically aren't there forever. And I remember asking. So I was in the M&A department, right? So they were on a big mergers and acquisition trail at the time, um, which obviously, as everybody out there who works in M&A knows, that eventually comes to an end. But I was the most junior person, and I was doing all the research. And then when I was leaving, we were on the same level as the executive suite, so all the CEOs, CFOs, etc. And I remember asking the secretary of the CEO, could I get 5 minutes of his time? I can't remember. But anyway, we had 5 minutes, and I said to him, because he was a CEO of a listed company on the FTSE 250. He was 40, 41. And I remember asking him clearly, uh, if I want to be where you are when I'm in my 40s, how do I do it? His advice was, get out of what you're doing now and see every aspect of the business. See sales, see marketing, see operations, see whatever you can see within a business and understand business in its entirety. And that has
Right.
lived with me forever. So when I left that
Mm.
job, I then went into marketing properly because obviously, as we all get when we're students, you want to do what you've studied at some point. So I did. I joined an energy company, and was in the sort of almost renewable energy at the time, waste management and that kind of thing division on the marketing front, before 2003, before being given the chance to move into recruitment, which I've stayed in forever since. So yes, I don't know if you wanted me to talk about how that came around, but I'm also more than happy to give you more detail.
Definitely. And I think that point that you said when you had that chat with the CEO, I think that is so key because so many times they say, especially for young people, to enter, sort of startups or smaller companies where you have the chance to be able to do and see different parts of the business rather than, sort of being a cog in a system, for example, and just doing a very, very small aspect and not really seeing that broader picture. And I think that is such key advice because you're not just understanding, where what you studied and applying that, you're actually understanding how that fits into the bigger part of the puzzle, which I think is such a key thing for sure. And I think as you then move up and you start managing people and you start doing all sorts of different roles, that probably comes in really handy because you're doing things beyond the scope of what you did at university or what you did in sort of your first job. And I guess on that point, sort of when did you realize that at first that sort of you wanted to go into recruitment and you wanted to make that something as part of your sort of career development?
When I was when I decided that I was going to leave the second job out of uni, I went to see a recruiter, and I still remember his name. I don't know if he's still around, but his name was David Love, and you can't forget a surname like that, obviously. And I went to see him, and he was working for a recruiter called Michael Page, and the conversation was, I just said to him, and again, I remember, I've got a very good memory. Maybe that's my superpower. I remember conversations and meeting people, but I remember saying to him, look, I've got energy to burn. I need to get in somewhere where I'm rewarded for my hard work because I've
Mm,
been through a couple of bonus cycles, and you go into the boss and they go, oh, you've done okay this year, and you get this small pay rise and you get your 3% bonus, and I just thought it doesn't actually really matter how hard I work here. And I need to get somewhere where I'm going to be rewarded. The harder I work, the more money I make, really. So anyway, long story short, I went for a few interviews, got a job in the City of London with Badenoch and Clark in 2003, and it was I cannot explain. Well, I can explain to you. So I want to give an example, and I quickly moved into the law space as well. But so this is 2003. London. So just off Fleet Street. I can't remember the name of the road actually, to be honest. But you're, and we're talking about Bainhoff and Clark at the time. Brilliant firm, great training, great people, fantastic. But a different life to now. 22 years later, different space. The easiest way to describe it is I went from a sleepy office in Leatherhead, in the deepest, darkest Surrey, where I was the youngest person in the office by about 30 years, to going into Bainhoff Clark, which had 250 salespeople on each floor. They had two floors, so it was 500 salespeople, all of a similar age to me. And and I know it sounds cheesy to say, but there's a scene in Wolf of Wall Street with Leonardo DiCaprio where there's a
yeah,
full office and they're going mental. They're all standing up there on the phone. Someone's getting
yeah.
fitted for a suit. It was exactly that. I remember walking in going, my word, it was so electric, so like something I'd never experienced before. And everyone looked
Hmm.
happy. Everyone was working hard. There was so much noise coming at you. And I just thought, this is the place I really want to be. And
Mm.
from the minute one, now being able to look back, what I really liked about the whole industry is that it's about people. It's about people, and it is about helping people to get the next level in their careers. And I've honestly, there's probably a lot of recruiters out there who are very commission based and would say something different and go, no, it's all about the money. But it isn't. It's, for me, it was about, I'm gonna help you get the next promotion, and that affects every
Yeah.
aspect of your life. And it's exactly why I've stayed in the industry for so long, because I'm really still super passionate about that, and about people's careers. So but the honest answer about the law side of things is that this is going to make me sound terrible, but we were in the, I started in hedge funds, and then I moved into the banking team, and then the law team was next door and they made bigger commission. And it was like, okay, the salaries are bigger over there. Okay. So
Mm.
start talking to the law team, and then got into that team. And then my first move overseas came around, and my job was to be head of the legal recruitment team. So yeah, it was really I've contradicted myself completely. I appreciate that, to the listeners out there, by saying that I'm very passionate about this. But there was a moment where it was like, oh, look, the law team, those salaries are very big, and they make very big commissions. So maybe I should try and do that. And but it's an industry that I've loved working as part of and serving for over 2 decades now. So I've not looked back.
I think that's interesting though, because I think that the bottom line is that money is an important and an aspect that people do consider when considering which jobs they want to go into. But I think that in order for something to be sustainable, you also have to have a level of passion and drive. And clearly, the fact that you've been in this industry for more than 2 decades suggests that you do have that interest alongside what may have been an initial entry into the profession because of commission, for example.
Yeah, an initial spark, if you like, just because, obviously, if there's anybody, let's be truthful, life isn't getting any cheaper, is it? I mean,
Definitely.
And I was living in Wimbledon, and I was, edging towards the back end of my 20s, and I was still living with 3 other people because I couldn't afford to buy a house because, the phenomenon of cost of living crisis and not being able to buy a house is nothing new. It was happening when I was in my 20s, 20 odd years ago. So, if you're in the industry that you like, which is, helping people, helping them succeed and get the next role and the next job, but you can also earn decent money off it, then in London, that's kind of what you need, I think. But yeah, that was something that really, like I say, I'm being honest with you, it sparked my interest, but I've never looked back. The law is a utterly fascinating industry, which I'm sure we'll get onto.
And coming to that question of, I guess, approaching the bid commission in a different way, now that you've been in the industry for such a long time, what would you say, or is there any difference between recruitment within the legal industry as opposed to recruitment in other industries for why perhaps people are paid those bid commissions? Is there something that's more difficult about recruitment within the legal profession?
Not necessarily. I think there's a distinction there's got to be a distinction between recruitment and executive search. There's the 2 branches of the industry. I initially started in recruitment, which is very much as what everybody would know, that sort of Michael Page, Robert Walters type environment. Executive search is much more what we do these days, which is much more, it's a slower pace, it's much more detailed, it's much more analytical. It takes a lot longer. The positions that we recruit for tend to be a lot more senior. But so the distinction's really there in terms of the commission structures and why. But recruitment, I mean, we won't get onto this. I don't want to bore your listeners too much, but it's an industry that obviously I love and I'm very passionate about. But as a structure, it's broken. The recruitment industry is broken. A large portion of it is still running the same way as it ran in the 80s, which is very, very low salaries, if any salary at all, and it's all commission based or largely commission based. So what you get, and everybody on this podcast and everybody who listens will have had a horror story of dealing with a recruiter at some point, largely not because they're a bad person or they're not very good at their job. It's just because if they don't place someone in that job, they're not going to get paid and they can't eat. So sadly, in the recruitment space, you have a lot of agents who work, and that is their key driver, is to make a placement. And then you will also have a lot of recruitment agencies that will set their consultants' KPIs, so key performance indicators, which will be on a weekly basis, and it will be, you must send this many CVs, you must make this many phone calls. It still works like that. So the problem with that is it produces volume and not quality. So you often find people moving into jobs that they then hate. And it's all about chasing the commission. And it's not an industry. It's not a side of the industry that I believe it needs to change. As much as people talk about the law and the need to change the billable hour, recruitment needs to change the commission models and the way that they incentivize their consultants. Because at the end of the day, the person that loses is you. The legal profession, because and then ultimately the firm that you might go to, because it might be a bad fit. So we don't do that anymore, and I haven't done that for over a decade. But I'm aware that it still goes on. And as you mature, you move into a much more mature way of doing business, I suppose. But also giving me the chance to move around the world, as it did, leaving London and moving to CML in the Cayman Islands. And subsequent moves after that, you find that whilst we as people are largely driven by the same things and we want the same securities and safeties, different countries and different markets have different ways of working, which again I find utterly fascinating.
Can you tell us a little bit about your role as VP within the Cayman Islands? So this idea of running an a kind of offshore legal recruitment team, what does that sort of look like, and what does your role actually entail?
Yeah, yeah, good question. It's a big move, really, but it was one
Mm,
that the sense of adventure came back to me in my late 20s. As in,
yeah.
I don't know if it still works like this, but there was a point where, if as a UK citizen, if you wanted to work in Australia, you had to on a like a 1 year visa or a 2 year visa, you had to do it before you turned 30. And I was edging that way. I was getting to 28, 29. So I started the idea of I'm going to go to Australia before I turned 30. And anyway, I won't bore you with all the details, but I met my now wife. She didn't want to go to Australia. We changed it around, and thanks to a few phone calls, and this is one thing I would tell all of you students, everybody looking to enter the workforce, is that the more you're on the front foot, the more you ask questions. My nickname at Baden
Mm,
Park, by the way, was Keen Rob, because I was always asking questions, and I
yeah.
must have driven people on insane. But I've always wanted to know that passion for learning, and that got me introduced to somebody who there was just come back from Cayman, and then that got me introduced to the
Mm,
GRM Group, and that got me ultimately to the Cayman Islands. And then thankfully, I was allowed to sort of grow and allowed to do what I wanted, largely. Um, starting and running a legal recruitment or legal search team in the Cayman Islands, it comes with its own challenges. First of all, Cayman, obviously everyone knows, and sometimes has a good rap, sometimes has a bad rap, depending on which
yeah.
movie you watch or which article you read. Beautiful place, and a wonderful bunch of wonderful people, wonderful mix and match of cultures, and bit small for my wife's liking at the end. That's why we moved, but gets very small. But
Yeah.
running there's so many different challenges. Like, the first challenge you face is, as you're trying to grow the team, is the talent available. Like, that's one thing that, in London or in the UK, you have millions of people to choose from, and people and really talented people. And obviously, the smaller the market, the tougher that is. So that was one challenge. But yeah, I mean, we went from, we're moving people from Clifford Chance to Linklaters, from UBS to Deutsche Bank in Canary Wharf, to becoming part travel agent and having to say to people in London, why don't you swap London and come here? I can see the beach from my office, and it's tax free, which, that's pretty much all I needed to say. Beach, tax free, sunshine. And most Brits were like, right, I'm there. And then it's like, and you're close to Miami and 3 hours from New York and whatever. No, tax free and beach. That's all I want. So yeah, it was challenging, but it was challenging in a different way. And this is something that a lot of people, unless your one is my age, will not really understand. There was a challenge within the business of abundance, and this is going to sound really silly, but this is pre-Lehman Brothers collapse, right? So
Right.
law firms in the Cayman Islands and in the offshore world. So, you go
Mm,
from, basically the markets are small, so you have to bring in other islands. We had to recruit in Bermuda, the British Virgin Islands, Dominican Republic, Turks and Caicos, wherever it may be, Trinidad, Tobago. Uh, that was one challenge, opening up new countries and new markets, and getting people to move there. But the challenge of abundance before the great crash in 2008 was that you just couldn't get enough. There was one law firm I remembered that went from like 16 people to well over 150 in 18 months. They were literally hiring like mad and just growing. And,
yeah.
and anyone who's listening to this will remember whatever city you were in at that time, wherever you were, it was just like it was never going to end. And of course, it
Yeah.
did. Uh,
It,
the,
yeah.
the big crash of 2007, 8, 9. So there was a different challenge there. Can we get the
Mm,
right talent? Can we get enough people to move? And then the great crash, and I hope in my lifetime I never feel that again. I really do, because funnily enough, someone asked me the other day, what does a recession feel like? And I was like, firstly,
Mm.
South Africa, which is in a permanent state of recession, so it feels like this normally. But
Yeah.
what she was really alluding to was whether there was any similarities between the GFC, the Great Financial Crisis, or this. And I said, no, the
Mm.
difference here is that with offices closing and things, markets, that we're a lot more driven by information. We kind of all know what's happening. We all know what's going on. The difference with the GFC is that no one expected it anywhere in the world, and no one knew what was coming next. I
Yeah.
mean, we've all seen the movie, is it Wall Street 2, where that old guy goes on about the ATMs will
Yeah.
stop working and people will not be able to get money out. Like that was a genuine fear. That's a brilliant scene, by the way.
Mm.
Watch it again. It's a really good scene because it really, that sort of tenseness of and The Big Short, which is a great movie. I mean, brilliant movie with all of the many famous people in it. But Steve Carell was excellent in that, and Margin Call, and all those movies they've made about it. That's what it felt like. No one had a clue what was going on. So
Yeah.
the challenges of working in the offshore environment, small but very important little market, when going from overnight from abundance to zero, is something that really shapes a lot of us of my certain vintage, shall I say? And it's something that we talk a lot about when we're looking at partners moving to different firms nowadays, or moving into from practice into in-house. One of the things that I'll talk to them about is, how did you deal with the global financial crisis? Talk me through it. Because that is, if you got through that and you managed to hold on to your job, and you managed to hold on to money, and did all that, and you kept your team going, and then that is a leader. That is a strategic leader that I would want to follow. So yeah, different challenges. Sorry, I seem to have rambled there, but different challenges in different
Yeah.
ways. I'm trying to give your listeners a real picture of how things can drop off the face of the planet before your very eyes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a big challenge. But by that point, I was also on my way to Hong Kong. Oh, okay.
And speaking about, we've talked so much about the financial crisis. The other thing that happened was you decided to start the GRM Group back in 2008, which I think, in one sense, I guess, like you talked about, from the abundance to zero, you can see sort of where that opportunity was. But can you tell us why you started at that particular moment in time, and what the sort of mission was behind starting the GRM Group?
Yeah, certainly. So I was still in Cayman, and the owners of CML were a guy called Steve and a guy called David, and I was by far the number three, the biggest fee earner and everything like that. And they basically offered me the chance to become a partner, but on the proviso that we start a new company somewhere else in the world, and that I
Right.
would be a partner in that business. And I said, yep. And I said to my now wife, who was then fiance, do you want to move? And she's, I'm ready to go. So we looked at credit to those two guys. They gave me all the freedom to look around the world and think where would be a good place for us to be. Then the global financial crisis was happening, but whilst we're in this process of leaving and
Right.
moving,
Uh-huh.
and I, thankfully for me and my future, they stuck with the idea of going ahead. There was a couple of conversations of, look, should we just batten down the hatches and not spend more money relocating you and things like that. But thankfully, I managed to. I can still remember the conversation. I said, the world will come back. It's still turning. That's another thing that people need to remember, especially those entering the workforce. There's always ups and downs, but the world still turns. Commerce still happens. Food still gets grown. We're all good. It will come back. Stay positive. And I just said, look, the best place for us to be will be in Asia, because China will come back faster than anyone else. And thankfully,
Right.
that made sense to them. We moved and we set up, registered the company GRM. And we were trading for the first couple of years as CML. But then in 2012, I did a management buyout. I bought the two partners out of the company, and I launched it as GRM Search in Hong Kong. And the team stayed with me and believed what I was doing. And look, this is no criticism to my business partners at the time who I bought out. They did well out of it, and I would remain friendly with them to this day. But this is another lesson for maybe your listeners who may want to go into an entrepreneurial environment in the future, which maybe you do as well. It's like any relationship. It has a time frame. And I think for someone like me who is constantly looking at what people need, what businesses need, how markets change, how skill sets are changing, one of the things that I pride myself on is this ability, back to the humility aspect, is to go, we're doing it wrong. We need to change. The market's saying this, and we need to go this way. And not in a neurotic everyday kind of fashion, obviously, but seeing what people need, trying to look ahead and being less reactive and more proactive. And that was where we parted, because they wanted to carry on with the norm, and I said no. I think Asia's doing this, Singapore's doing this, China wants this. So yeah, I did that, and that was, it's brave. Obviously, it's brave because going out on your own, whether it's your own law firm or whether it's your own podcast, or I'm sure you can remember way back when you did your first podcast, the mouth's a bit dry, you're trying something for the first time, and but you've got to back yourself, and that's it. And I knew I was good at what I did, and I knew that the clients liked working with me, and they and still to this day, someone even said to me, a partner of a law firm said to me the other day that there's simply nobody in this market that has as much passion as you do for people's careers, Rob. And that is, it was kind of a kind of moment. Someone's seen it, and it's still, it was true then and it's true now. So and that was what, 13 years ago now, going out on my own. Been an interesting time.
And I think just, seeing kind of the website and seeing the journey that the company's been on, it's incredible, all of the marks you've made, and also all the different regions that you've expanded to, which is a little bit of what I wanted to talk about. So I guess you mentioned that, clients always talk about the passion you have. For someone who is listening out there who maybe has a passion to start their own law firm or business of that kind, how, in a practical way, do you show that? Sort of, I guess, what makes the GRM Group stand out from other recruitment services, which means that clients feel that sort of passion coming from your service?
I think there's a couple of things there, and I'll try and keep it generic, because then generic specific if I can, because then it will probably resonate with some of the listeners who might do different businesses in the future. Is that I've got a lot of empathy. It's a natural skill or talent or trait that I have. I genuinely get to know the people that I work with, candidates, clients, my teammates, and I genuinely do care about people. And I think that comes shining through, and that's the same in any service provider, law, anything. If you genuinely care, you can't lie. You can't lie your way through that, unless you're a complete psychopath. But I'm not, probably. So I think as business goes on and as you grow and as you get older, one of the things looking back you can realize is that if you are consistently yourself, then people will warm to you, and clients will come to you, and people will use you. In addition to that, and this is something that I've always prided us on, wherever the teams have been in the world, whoever's worked with me will know that we pride ourselves on knowledge of the markets. How is law changing? How is the law firm changing? How are the markets changing? How are their clients moving, and what are they going to need? What skill sets are going to be needed? Which at the moment, as we have this conversation, is at an all-time high within the legal sector in terms of skill sets that are changing in the future direction of the industry, which I am utterly passionate about. So I think these are the things that set us apart, is that you get someone who genuinely cares, and the way that we hire, the team that we bring in is, they're not here, just in case but if they were, I would say the same thing. They're really good people, and they're good. They're the kind of people that you want to spend time with, and they really care about the work they do. And I think that really, more than ever, is going to come out. in the legal sector. You cannot hide who you are, and if you have that empathetic trait, you'll do really, really well. But yeah, look, Hong Kong is a different market, and so is Singapore and other places. And I think as you go along in your life and you move around the world, no doubt, you're in a position, a company, and this is a lesson for everybody, a company or in a country or a market where you have to almost be someone different. And I think whilst Hong Kong was very good to me, looking back, I do think that wasn't really the real me. We were hugely successful. And I have put together some very successful teams, and we won a lot of awards. I'm very proud of that. I've kept one of them over there, which was Recruiter of the Year in 2015. Very, very proud of what we achieved. But the most important lesson I learned out of all of that is to get back to being you at some point, and that is what you're seeing now. I'm much more me now. The Hong Kong Rob was probably a bit too Hong Kongified, which will make sense to anyone who's lived there. But a bit more frantic and a bit busier.
Definitely. I mean, I before moving to the UK, we lived in Hong Kong for 5 years because my dad used to work there, and I think that having moved from Asia to Europe, I think that the cultures are so different, and I think Hong Kong as a place in itself is very, very unique. And so I think, as much as I can't relate to it on sort of a professional perspective, I think that from a personal perspective and seeing it in, education, other parts of the country, it's definitely got a unique set of characteristics and people for sure.
The way that we are in Hong Kong at the top of, the fifth largest economy in the world, where, very similar to doing deals and working in London and New York and shaping it, and Shanghai I spent a lot of time in as well. You have to almost be a different person. You have to be a bit more cutthroat.
And speaking a little bit about where you are now, so you mentioned at the start that you've been in Africa for the past 8 years. So, and you've expanded your client footprint sort of in various regions. But honing in on Africa a little bit more, why did you feel like you wanted to expand to this region, and sort of where do you see it going in terms of the legal market over the next couple of years?
I have now worked and done staffing projects and executive search projects I've lived and worked 4 continents and in 56 cities to date. And I go to these places and I've met the people. I've got on the tram, I've got on the tube, I've got on the bus, I've gone to the shops, I've walked the walk, I've walked down the street, wherever it may be, from Ho Chi Minh to where, parts of South America. Like I've gone there and seen what it would be like to work there and live there and that kind of thing. And I think that has shaped me and my ability to continue to offer a good service, because what it's shown me is that I have a lot more, probably because of my empathetic trait and things like that, and the person I am, I seem to enjoy more and get on better with emerging and developing markets.
Right.
Yeah, it's not to say that I didn't enjoy living in London and Hong Kong and various other places, but I find the ability to help businesses grow, to help careers grow in places where they need it most, much more appeals to me as a person. So 2014 was when I set 2013 was when I set the office up in South Africa. After a lot of discussions, with my wife and her family who are here, and but also clients, and looking at where was next, where's the future, and then we set the office up, moved here in 2017, and have not looked back. And what you've got here is well, first of all, we haven't yet touched all 54 countries in Africa, which I'm really looking forward to doing. We have a strategy to help and work in all the countries that we can possibly reach. It starts with, we've got a 5 in 5 marketing campaign where we're interviewing and meeting lawyers in each of the 54 countries, talking about their lives, their lives, their jobs, the opportunities, the law, the business, what's going on, what's happening. And that's kickstarted. We've done 5 countries so far. We've got another 10 lined up. So it's really growing, but we're doing a lot more research. We have a research company called GRM Intelligence, which is doing a lot of market entry work. We finished projects this year in Senegal, Cote d'Ivoire, Namibia, Botswana, Mozambique, and Algeria. And we are now starting to do, and so that's, I'm telling you this because I'm actually giving away our strategy, but it's fine. I don't mind sharing. We're marketing, research, then executive search. And now we're doing some executive search projects in Tanzania and Kenya and Morocco as well. We're also part owner, organizer of the African General Council Summit, so the GC Summit, which we brought to Cape Town this year, which was a phenomenal success. 360 of the leading lawyers, in-house lawyers from across Africa, 23 countries, they all flew in. We had a brilliant 2 days. That's going on again in February, and now we're bringing, and next year, hot off the press, just for you and your listeners, we're doing, we're replicating that in North Africa as well, in Cairo, in November of next year. So we're going to be doing a North and South African GC Summit, which brings together all of the businesses. And the conversations, Shreya, were just as you'd want. They're just these esteemed leaders within law, but talking to each other, swapping ideas, going, what's happening? What's going on in the digital space? What's happening with AI? What are the, how can we help the businesses that are moving in, the international conglomerates that really don't understand Africa as a continent? And that's where we come in. We're helping with a lot of research, understanding how things are working. I mean, the research project we did in Senegal included the speed of the internet in certain towns and cities, things like that, because businesses need to know. You don't want to turn up day one, invest $10 million and then go, the internet doesn't work. It's really at the early stages of helping countries and helping companies move into different countries, and then really looking at the talent available as well, and trying to introduce on a wide, sort of high level message, really trying to introduce the companies and law firms within the continent, that there is talent over the border as well as locally, and also international brands moving in to do it properly. And I've had a lot of experience in Asia of law firms moving into China and Singapore, Indonesia, Thailand, Hong Kong, and not doing it correctly, doing it wrong and closing and leaving. So there's a lot. I've just given you a lot of information there, but as in, I know but we're doing a lot, and it's really. I often say this. I might have been here nearly 8 years, but I feel like I'm just at the beginning, because these countries are so nuanced. They're so different. I mean, you just mentioned there, you grew up in India. I mean, it's another country that is just so massive and so nuanced. And so, I mean, if you go from one side of the country to the other, you come across so many different cultures and languages, and the way of doing business in each of those cities and provinces, very similar to the African continent. And then finally on that point as well, what excites me is that there's a big connection between the growth in the Middle East and Africa as well. You've got, I was in Riyadh in May. I'm going to be in Dubai at the Middle Eastern General Council Summit in 2 weeks' time, speaking on the future of in-house remuneration and salaries, etc. Riyadh was just incredible, and there's a lot of connection between East Africa and the Middle East. So it's all going really, really well. And I think a lot of our clients and lawyers are enjoying the fact that I've been through a lot of mistakes in Asia, and I've seen what's happened, what pitfalls companies have fallen into. So, but yeah, it's changing time, as you alluded to in your notes about A&O and Hogan Lovells as well.
Definitely. And I just wanted to talk about it because I think that that's really interesting. Seeing that paradox of obviously international law firms who are deciding to move out. Do you think that on the one hand that can be seen as, what are they thinking about the future of the African legal market? But do you think that gives the chance for local law firms and other law firms to step in and take that step? Or do you think that that signals that other law firms will also be following that trajectory and exiting the market instead?
Yeah, phenomenal question again. It really is. I mean, very hot topic at the moment because obviously,
Mm,
the South African legal market has been, well, my phone has been off the hook, to be honest,
I can imagine, yeah.
of just people asking what's going on, really. I'll, 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 I'll always tell you what's on my mind and what I believe is true because we do a lot of data and a lot of analysis and we work with a lot of firms. I'll be careful not to mention any names and I'll
Of
try to
course.
distinct for my sake where it's an opinion. I'll caveat it with this is just my opinion. Um,
Yeah.
South Africa is a wonderful country. It's a nuanced and tricky little beast. Um, it is a country with three capitals and 12 official languages. It is
Mm,
so wonderfully diverse. Diversity in this country is what makes it the most amazing place,
yeah.
one of the most amazing places I've lived. I often joke with my South African colleagues that when you clicks that how good you guys are, you're going to take over the world. So that but from a legal perspective, it's a market that's facing a lot of challenge. Okay, so you have it's one of the most splintered legal markets in the world. There's
Mm,
30,000 registered attorneys and 15,500 law firms registered. So that's a 2-to-1 ratio. And in London, I think it would be like 22-to-1 or something. There's it's very
yeah.
splintered. So the bulk of the industry here is one person shops or two people. There's a
Right.
very small number of international law firms and a very small number of local firms with over 25 people. So
Mm,
the splintering does affect remuneration and it does affect opportunities as well because there's a lot of people who don't hire because they just they stay on their own. So it's a difficult market. And add to that as well, I'm just giving some context by the way. Add to that as well, you've got um, the Law Society here said something like, in rough numbers, about 5,000 students leaving a legal, an education facility with a legal qualification every year. I know that's quite vast, but and only 1,000 trainee positions, and that obviously compounds every year. So just since
right.
I've been here, that I don't know, do the math, 4 times 8, 4,000, 4,000 times 8 years of people who haven't managed to get a traineeship.
Mm,
It's got very big challenges. You've then got
no.
and I'll and I'm not offering an opinion here, but you have certain employment legislation here that is tricky. You have what they call triple BEE, which is broad-based Black economic empowerment, which is part of the legislation that jobs must go to those who are previously disadvantaged before anyone else. Now,
Right.
I'm not here to offer an opinion. It's a hurdle that a lot of firms struggle with because you're
Right.
already talking about a talent pool that's quite small, and then you make it even smaller. Um,
Mm,
then you and then also you've got the unions are very strong here. Not that that affects law, but that affects businesses in terms of affecting growth. So there's a lot of things that need to sort of maneuver and adapt. But
yeah.
it also, in the same breath, we're talking about a country that's only been a democracy for 30 years. You know, coming
Yeah.
out of the worst environment and political structure you could
Mm,
even imagine. I mean, that's only 30
yeah.
years ago. So there's a lot of people in the workplace who were working when that was happening. So, I always mention the trials and tribulations that companies face when they come into South Africa, but I also mention it, I would caveat it with, it's still a very young country, and when we're young,
Yeah.
we make mistakes, right? So, and we learn, but it's a country that's very passionate about getting things right and doing the right thing for the right people. So bringing that back full circle to the legal market, I said very categorically that the departures by those two law firms were not systematic or symptomatic rather of the market as a whole.
Right.
That was definitely more, again, I think, and it's not unfair of me to say, I read one piece, A&O didn't really make much of a statement. A&O Sherman, they just said, thanks to everybody, we're closing Johannesburg.
Yeah.
You know, I'll tell you off camera why I think that was, but in terms of the fact that they might not have got the strategy right, or they may not have, it might not be a core market. They've just gone through a merger, haven't they? A&O, Sherman, Sterling. They're looking at it probably thinking, well, it's not making a huge amount of money in comparison to other countries, and maybe it's not. I think they've closed a few offices, so it's not like it's a standalone. And Hogan Lovells, they obviously had their well-documented issues post-Zondo Commission, which was the Chief Justice Raymond Zondo who put together the report here on state capture. They were heavily implicated in that as their former. And then they closed it, and then they restarted it. And I think one of the statements on one of the articles by a former partner was, "We never quite found our place in South Africa." And I think that's probably wonderfully put. So they're very isolated incidents of companies that have gone, you know what, we don't need to be there, we're going to move on. They may have South African lawyers in their London office that would be able to do the work, for instance. So it's not, the market is wonderfully nuanced. I think there's a lot of very strong players, very similar to somewhere like Korea or Singapore used to be, where they've got strong law firms. Seoul is a prime example. There's 3 major law firms, and here there's 5 big ones. And South Africa as an economy isn't that big. It isn't massive. It isn't, America. It is. So I think maybe a few challenges would probably lead to those firms looking and going. So my tips for any international firm is, if you're not looking at the African continent, not necessarily South Africa, but the African continent, then you are crazy. But when you do come in to the markets, wherever it be Kenya, Morocco, Algeria, Egypt, Nigeria, Angola, Ghana, wherever it may be, do it from I coined the phrase local first. That's the tip I always give them from a strategic perspective. Local first. Bed yourself in, understand the market. Like I've moved here. I moved here 7 years ago. I moved my whole family and my kids and everything. And understand the market you're in, and understand the nuances and the languages and the cultures, and make a life there. Pay your taxes, buy a house. Really go through the growth, as it were, and you'll find your place. And then you can look international, which again is one of my strategic tips for my law firm clients that I typically help them with, or we help them with. So I think it shocked a few people when such big, wonderful brands as A&O Sherman and Hogan Lovells exit a market. But once you look into it and you isolate it, it's not a surprise. And I think we found out the other day, didn't we, that the A&O team just moved over the road to Bowman. So, and I'm sure the guys at Hogan Lovells will also find themselves good homes. So I think if it shows anybody anything, it's not easy in life. It's not easy to move to a new country, build a life, build a market, make money, and do. It's not, and that goes for anybody listening to this. But it's not impossible. So I know I've got big hopes for this continent.
Definitely. And I don't want to take up too much of your time, but just to sort of finish off, I guess, looking a little bit at, we spoke a lot about growth and looking at the future. So can you tell us a little bit about the plans for the GRM Group over the next couple of years, some goals you have for the African region and perhaps any other regions that you might want to expand to?
Yeah, absolutely. I've got nothing to hide. I've always said that. Anybody, even if they considered a competitor, if they wanted to phone me up and ask me what we're doing, I'd be, we've just got to be better and we've got to work harder, haven't we? That's the thing.
Definitely.
And it goes back to that humility that I mentioned. We have a very clear goal, and there is a big drive on the continent. And again, I'm loath to keep talking about Africa as one market because I'm looking over there, there's a map on the wall, it's massive, it's huge. Like, you know, I mean, the continents and every single market we've worked in is so wonderful. I need to brush up on my French and my Swahili is what I need to do. That's job number one. But there's a massive drive for access to justice, you know, you know, there's a lot of, whilst there's a lot of businesses moving in, creating jobs, creating opportunities. You know, just down the road here, obviously you can't see, but I'm pointing in the direction it is. Amazon's just finished building their Africa head office here in Cape Town. Humongous campus. Brilliant for the local economy. Excellent. Keep coming. Everybody should keep coming in, but understand that there are challenges. You know, up until last year, South Africa had 280 days of load shedding, which in any other language means power cuts. So every day we would be without Wi-Fi and electricity. So, you know, I mean, slightly off topic, but I'm a big sports fan and combat sports, and there's a UFC fighter called Dricus du Plessis, who's a world champion, and he's South African. And when I saw him do an interview recently, and he said, none of these guys in America understand what it's like to train with no power. And it's like, yeah, you know, we're working in an environment that sometimes, when I moved here, we were 1 week away from running out of water. All the signs on the road were like, day zero is coming. Like, it's really, really challenging. Again, this is sometimes often, you know, challenges that maybe countries like India or South Africa or other parts of Africa as well, and South America, and that face. But those in some of the other countries where, you know, the cities like London and New York aren't used to. So these are big challenges. But access to justice and access to that, having someone like me and the team that I have around me, who has that experience of global careers, of what people can do with it when they leave university, and when they're building their career at any stage, even close to retirement. Where can they go? What can they do? Understanding their value, understanding their worth, understanding that if you're sitting in the middle of a village in the Northern Cape, if you can do the job, then we can help you show you the route to go down. So it sounds like, you know, hope it doesn't sound wishy-washy, because that is our strategy. It's bringing global opportunities to the African continent. So part of what I'm doing in Dubai and what I was doing in Riyadh in May is meeting firms and trying to build a pathway for African lawyers to be able to move to the Middle East and vice versa. Part of what we're doing with the 5 and 5 series is bringing every single African country and legal market together. So whether it's South Sudan, whether it's Djibouti, whether it's Chad, whether it's South Africa, Kenya, no one gets left behind. So, and understanding each other and the challenges that each other are facing, whether it's power, electricity, access to lawyers, whatever it might be. So there's a lot going on in that space. Really, the next 20 to 30 years is Africa's time. Probably Africa and India, and parts of the Middle East, if we're honest. This section of the world, it's your time, it's our time, and we're bringing world-class services to that. And it's not about, you know, it's not about being right. It's about being really good for those people who, you know, who might not have seen what opportunities there are outside of the world, and also, you know, bringing other companies in. You know, we live in a world now where you know, they don't necessarily have to bring an office here and set up like Amazon have done, but they could have a legal team here. There's a lot of work, you know. Slightly off topic, but it might resonate with some of your listeners. I saw this morning a post by a lawyer, a black lady in Australia, and I'm going to dig it out for you so you can use it. I sent it to someone, and she said, and she was talking about, you might have seen it on LinkedIn. She's talking about applying for jobs, and she's got a very African name. And she changed the name to a more white name, and her interviews went up threefold. And I've talked about that all around the world. The undisclosed, or, you know, the unconscious bias and discrimination there is in the workplace is something that's very close to my heart. Those of you who are listening, please visit our website, umbii.com, umbii.com. It is a platform that we have developed which removes the person's name and gender and color and background and pushes their skills and experience to the fore. So if someone like Amazon needs a lawyer and they need them to do X, Y, and Z, they've got the whole world to pull from. If they then interview the people and then they have bias and discrimination, then that's their problem. But what we were finding is that people weren't even being given the chance. So the platform umbi.com is something we have a team in place now, and we are pushing, and it's going really, really well. So there's a lot going on in our space, and yeah, like I say, I mean, and then that's Africa, but also on the law front, this is going to really resonate with you, and your fellow law students and some of your listeners. For the first time ever, the legal industry is going through unbelievable changes. Like since the advent and the release of ChatGPT 18 months ago, I have never known anything like it. It's probably in a different way almost as shocking as the global financial crisis, because you're talking about an industry that really knew itself. They knew itself, they knew what was happening. The jobs were always the same: associate, senior associate, paralegal, legal secretary. And now the advent of AI and the advent of other tech tools, we are going to see we already are seeing a monumental change to the way that legal services is offered and who can offer it. And that really excites me, like you wouldn't believe. Because whenever a lawyer or a wannabe lawyer gets a little bit nervous, and I'm sure you've probably talked about it with others as well, whenever they get a little bit nervous, I always say to them, have a look at investment banking. Right? Investment banking is an industry that eats every piece of new technology that comes to the market. Right? They're developing their own technology all the time to be faster, quicker, more accurate, more successful. In the 1970s, the average investment bank was what? 20 people, 100 people, max. I think Morgan Stanley had 100 people in it. 20 years later, it had 10,000. 20 years after that, it's got 350,000 people. Jobs are created, careers are built. Technology can help, and the law just needs to realize that if they really want to continue to be successful and to be even better and bigger and brighter than they were before, then they need to bring it in. And I don't know if you've had a chance to listen to, but if you haven't, please listen to this, right? I did an interview with a guy called Jordan Furlong about 2 weeks ago. Jordan is a globally renowned law firm strategist. I'll send you the link. Please have a listen to that, because he just talked beautifully about the future of careers, the future structure of law firms, how they look like this at the moment, but they're going to look like this, how it's going to incorporate. And there was one word in there that every wannabe lawyer needs to have in the back of their head that I just took away, is capacity. Law firms typically will hire another person and work them 2,500 hours every year till they fall down and they've not slept. That's how typically they would have produced capacity. With the advent of tech, you can create capacity without having to do that. So very excited about everything that's happening in law, everything that's happening in Africa. Sorry, I feel like I've waffled on too much, but I'm very, very passionate about people's careers and what's happening here, despite the fact that sometimes we don't have any power. We just get over it.
Thank you so much. I think that's, provided so much insight, especially because I think, especially with AI, and this is a conversation in and of itself, is something that excites people, but also scares so many people, particularly in the legal profession, because it's been so adverse to change for so long. And I think that now with AI, there is just no way that they cannot change, because it's changing every industry, for the foreseeable future. And I think that it's going to be really exciting, very, very soon to see how it's going to affect my career, but so many other people who are entering the legal profession and who are already within the profession as well, which I think is an even bigger change.
Apologies if I've missed it, but something that might be worthwhile for you, and I think you could be a good person to pull this together, would be to get a round table, even if it's virtually, of a partner in a law firm in London, maybe someone in America, maybe someone in Australia, someone in Africa, a law student like yourself, people at different stages of their careers, in-house counsel, and just talk about the future of law and legal careers with the advent of AI, because everyone's going to have very different opinions, and it'll be really useful for people of your age group and stage of your career, because you'll hear it from the people in the industry how it's going to change.
That's such a brilliant idea. I think it would be amazing, and I always keep, especially on LinkedIn or every other sort of sites. There's so much information about it, and it's so fascinating. So I think that it warrants a discussion in and of itself, and that's a brilliant way to do it for sure. I think if I can pull together that round table, that would be a dream team,
I'll help
for
you.
sure.
I'll
But
help you. Listen,
thank you so much. On that note, though, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
thank you.
You've given us so much of your time, and I really, really appreciate it. I hope that people take away from this conversation what you spoke about humility, which is so important, the future of the African market, and I think generally anyone who wants to go into business of any sort, I think will be really, really helped by this conversation. So thank you for coming on.
Well, thank you for inventing the podcast in the first place. Thank you for inviting me to come on and giving me a chance to waffle. But I no, I mean it. You're doing great stuff, and I'll help you and any of your listeners if they ever want to reach out. I'm always willing to give advice out on LinkedIn, or if they want to email me or whatever. We are all in this together. And I'll be delighted to help out. But no, thank you, Shreya, and thank you. Keep up your good work as well.
Definitely. And we didn't get a chance to talk about your podcast, but I'll put all of the links down below for where people can hear more about you and can hear more about everything that you're doing, so that people can reach out as well. But yeah, thank you once again. And on that note, thank you so much for listening to this episode, and a massive shout out to Rob for taking the time to come on Commerce Meets Law. If you enjoyed this episode, please do let me know by emailing commercemeetslaw@gmail.com or with a DM on Instagram @commercemeetslaw. And for extra Soma content, do check out the Commerce Meets Law YouTube channel and our TikTok. For now, take care, goodbye, and I'll see you very soon on the next episode.